Flight attendant slaps black billionaire. But what happens next will leave you speechless. Sebastian remained calm, his hands resting lightly on his lap as he waited for Bethany to return. He could hear the whispers around him, passengers murmuring about the situation. Some expressed outrage at Bethany's behavior, while others speculated about who he might be. Despite the tension, Sebastian kept his head held high, refusing to let the moment diminish his dignity. If this story has captivated you so far, don't forget to share it with your friends and family. Your support helps bring more stories like this to life. Let us know where in the world you're watching from in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Hit that like button and subscribe to stay tuned for the incredible twist coming up next. Let's dive deeper into what happens on this unforgettable flight. Bethany returned, her face a mix of frustration and embarrassment. She held out the ticket reluctantly, her lips pressed into a thin line. "It appears your ticket is valid," she said, her tone begrudging, as if admitting defeat was a personal insult. Sebastian accepted the ticket with a nod, his calm demeanor unchanged. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice devoid of malice, but carrying an unmistakable note of dignity. The passengers who had been watching seemed to exhale collectively, the tension in the cabin easing. Bethany, however, seemed unwilling to let the matter rest. Her eyes lingered on Sebastian, a flicker of something darker, resentment perhaps, crossing her face. "If you need anything else, let someone else know," she said curtly before turning sharply on her heel and walking away. Sebastian's lips curved into a faint smile. He had encountered prejudice and judgment throughout his life, and while it still stung, it no longer surprised him. Instead of dwelling on the incident, he opened his book and began reading, letting the words transport him away from the cabin's charged atmosphere. However, the momentary peace didn't last long. Bethany returned, this time with a drink tray. As she leaned over to serve another passenger, she accidentally spilled water, the clear liquid splashing directly onto Sebastian's suit. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Bethany said, her tone flat and insincere. Her eyes, however, betrayed a hint of satisfaction. Sebastian glanced down at his soaked lap, then back up at her. He could see through the act, but chose not to react. Instead, he reached for a napkin and began dabbing at the wet fabric, his movements deliberate and composed. "It's fine," he said softly, though his gaze held hers for a moment longer than necessary. There was no anger in his eyes, only a calm that unnerved her. She turned away quickly, busying herself with serving others, but the unease on her face was evident. The incident might have ended there, but fate had other plans. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing an unexpected delay due to technical issues. Passengers groaned in frustration, but Sebastian took the news in stride. He returned to his book, prepared to wait it out. Unbeknownst to Bethany, one of the passengers seated nearby had been quietly recording the entire interaction. The man, a tech entrepreneur with a significant social media following, recognized Sebastian almost immediately. He was aware of Sebastian's contributions to society and his reputation as a philanthropist. Disgusted by Bethany's behavior, he decided to share the video online with a caption that read, "When kindness meets ignorance." Within minutes, the clip began to go viral. By the time the flight was finally ready for takeoff, Bethany's actions had sparked outrage across social media platforms. Comments poured in, criticizing her treatment of the elderly man and praising Sebastian for his patience and grace. As the plane cruised at 30,000 feet, Bethany remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing online. But Sebastian was not the type to seek revenge. Instead, he focused on the bigger picture, how moments like these were opportunities to inspire change and promote understanding. Sebastian closed his eyes for a brief moment, letting the sting in his cheek fade and gathering his thoughts. The slap wasn't just a moment of humiliation. It was a stark reminder of the biases he had fought against his entire life. But this wasn't the time for anger or retaliation. Instead, he chose calm, measured action. He reopened his eyes, meeting the shocked and curious gazes of the other passengers. Offering a slight, reassuring smile, he silently communicated that he was still in control. The weight of the moment hung heavy in the air, and Bethany, standing frozen, seemed to realize the enormity of what she had done. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Sebastian decided it was time to set things in motion. Discreetly, he picked up his phone once more. He began drafting another message, not just to the airline CEO, but to the diversity and inclusion board of his new acquisition. The message was clear and focused. This incident today highlights a deeper issue within our staff training and conduct. As the new owner, I want immediate steps taken to ensure all employees undergo bias awareness training. Discrimination, whether intentional or unconscious, cannot be tolerated. I will personally oversee the implementation of these changes. He paused for a moment before hitting send, reflecting on how the slap wasn't just about him. It was about everyone who had ever been judged unfairly, dismissed, or mistreated because of someone else's prejudice. Sebastian leaned back in his seat, observing Bethany's behavior for the remainder of the flight. Her once confident stride had turned into anxious, hurried movements. She avoided his section entirely, tasking other attendants with his area. Occasionally, she glanced nervously in his direction, the weight of what might come next clearly pressing on her. Passengers whispered amongst themselves, some shooting disapproving looks at Bethany, others offering Sebastian apologetic smiles, as though they could sense the injustice. But Sebastian remained dignified and calm, letting the gravity of the moment speak louder than any confrontation ever could. As the flight neared its destination, Sebastian pulled out a small notebook and began jotting down ideas. This incident had provided him with an unfiltered view of the airline's internal culture, and he was determined to turn this moment into an opportunity for meaningful change. In his mind, a plan was forming, a way to not only address what had happened, but also ensure that the airline would become a shining example of equality, professionalism, and respect. He wasn't just thinking about Bethany's actions. He was envisioning a transformation that would ripple far beyond this one flight. By the time the plane touched down, Sebastian was ready. The wheels of change had already been set in motion, and Bethany's judgmental slap would soon lead to the most significant reckoning of her career, and a brighter, more inclusive future for the airline. Problems would require more than just words. It needed action, accountability, and leadership from the top. This wasn't just about correcting Bethany's behavior. It was about transforming an entire system that had allowed such issues to persist unchecked. Sebastian's thoughts turned to the elderly woman he had assisted earlier. Her quiet gratitude reminded him of why he worked so hard to build his company and make a difference. It wasn't about the money or prestige. It was about creating a better world for everyone, especially those who had been marginalized or overlooked. The flight continued uneventfully, but Sebastian remained deep in thought. By the time the plane began its descent, his plans were already taking shape. As the wheels touched down, he made a decision. This airline would become a model of inclusivity and respect, setting a new standard in the industry. When the plane came to a stop and the passengers began to disembark, Sebastian stayed seated, waiting for Bethany to walk by. She approached hesitantly, her earlier confidence replaced by unease. Her eyes darted nervously to his as she handed him a polite but terse farewell. "Thank you for flying with us, sir," she said, her voice tight. Sebastian met her gaze, his expression calm but firm. "Bethany, I hope today gives you a chance to reflect," he said evenly. "Not just on your actions, but on how you treat others. You never know who you're speaking to or what they've been through." Bethany blinked, her face pale. She opened her mouth as if to respond, but said nothing. She nodded stiffly and hurried away. Sebastian stood, gathered his belongings, and exited the plane. As he walked through the terminal, his mind was already on the next steps. The moment he stepped into the car waiting for him, he began drafting an email to the airline's board of directors. The email was clear, concise, and unflinching. It outlined the incidents on the flight, the systemic issues he had uncovered, and his vision for change. He ended it with a firm directive. This is not negotiable. As a new owner, I expect immediate action. Let's not just address the problem. Let's lead the industry by example." Sebastian hit send, leaning back in his seat with a sense of purpose. Change wasn't going to happen overnight, but he was ready to see it through. The events of the flight had been painful, but they had also sparked something powerful. A determination to ensure no one else would ever have to face the kind of prejudice and disrespect he had experienced that day. In the weeks and months that followed, Sebastian's vision began to take shape. Training programs were implemented, complaints were taken seriously, and policies were reformed. Bethany, along with others who had displayed similar behavior, was required to undergo intensive retraining. As for Sebastian, he didn't just change the airline's culture. He inspired others to do the same. His story became a powerful example of turning adversity into opportunity, proving that with determination and compassion, it's possible to create a better, fairer world for everyone. Needed training felt like an insult as Bethany stewed over the notice. A supervisor approached her, a clipboard in hand and a sympathetic expression on her face. "Bethany," the supervisor said softly, "I know this might feel unnecessary, but this session is part of a company-wide initiative. It's not just about you. It's something we're doing for everyone to help create a better environment for both staff and passengers." Bethany forced a tight smile, nodding curtly. "I understand," she replied, though her tone betrayed her irritation. Over the next few weeks, the training sessions began. Employees were required to attend interactive workshops led by diversity and inclusion experts. These sessions weren't the typical boring lectures Bethany had expected. Instead, they featured open discussions, role-playing scenarios, and testimonials from passengers who had experienced discrimination or poor treatment. At first, Bethany resisted. She felt defensive and singled out, her mind constantly justifying her past actions. But as the sessions continued, something began to shift. One day, a speaker, a young black woman who had faced repeated discrimination while traveling, shared her story. Her voice trembled as she recounted being ignored by staff, judged by fellow passengers, and made to feel invisible. As the woman spoke, Bethany found herself listening in a way she hadn't before. For the first time, she considered how her actions, intentional or not, might have made others feel. The realization was uncomfortable, but it planted a seed of reflection. Meanwhile, Sebastian monitored the progress of the training program closely. He received regular updates on participation and feedback from employees. To his satisfaction, many staff members were engaging wholeheartedly, eager to learn and improve. He also began receiving positive reports from passengers who noticed a warmer, more inclusive atmosphere on board. Bethany's transformation was slow, but it was real. By the end of the training sessions, she approached her supervisor with a request. "I've been thinking," she said hesitantly. "I'd like to work on some of the new onboarding materials for flight attendants. Maybe share what I've learned through this process." The supervisor smiled, sensing the sincerity in Bethany's tone. "That's a great idea. Let's talk to HR about getting you involved." Sebastian, too, noticed a change in Bethany. On a surprise flight inspection months later, he observed her interacting with passengers. Her demeanor was more patient and attentive, her smile genuine. She even assisted an elderly passenger with her bag without hesitation, earning a grateful "thank you, dear" in return. The airline's transformation didn't happen overnight, but it was unmistakable. Complaints about discriminatory behavior dwindled, and employee satisfaction soared. Passengers began praising the airline for its exemplary service and inclusive culture. Sebastian's vision had become a reality. As he sat in the first-class cabin on a flight one day, he glanced around at the diverse group of passengers and crew. A sense of pride washed over him. Not for his ownership of the airline, but for the positive change he had helped create. For Bethany and for many others, it had been a journey of growth. And for Sebastian, it was proof that even the most challenging experiences could lead to meaningful progress when met with compassion, determination, and a commitment to doing what was right. Training Center felt sterile and unwelcoming, a sharp contrast to the vibrant energy she was used to on the plane. Bethany's heart pounded with irritation as she made her way to the reception desk, where a cheerful woman greeted her with a warm smile. "Hi, you must be Bethany. Welcome to the sensitivity training," the receptionist said, her tone almost too enthusiastic for Bethany's mood. She nodded curtly and took the seat indicated by the woman, her mind racing with frustration. As other flight attendants began to file in, some of them greeted her with polite smiles, but Bethany couldn't shake the feeling of being singled out. She didn't want to be here. She wasn't one of those people, those who needed training on basic human decency. Yet, she couldn't ignore the nagging thought that perhaps something bigger was going on within the airline, something she wasn't seeing. The training session started promptly, and the facilitator, a middle-aged man with a calm, soothing voice, introduced the program. "Today's session is about creating a culture of empathy, respect, and inclusion," he began, his eyes scanning the room. "We're going to talk about how we treat passengers and how small actions can make a world of difference." Bethany crossed her arms and leaned back in her chair, mentally preparing herself to endure the day. She tried not to roll her eyes as the facilitator began discussing the impact of unconscious bias. It all felt so abstract to her, so removed from the way she had always done her job. But as the session progressed and they began to delve into specific scenarios, something started to shift within her. One of the exercises involved role-playing, where participants took turns playing both flight attendants and passengers in various situations. Bethany found herself paired with a younger man, an eager new hire who looked nervous as he read his scenario. He was to play the role of a black passenger who had been ignored by the flight attendant, with Bethany assigned the task of responding. As they acted out the scenario, the young man's voice quivered, portraying a hurt passenger who felt unseen and disrespected. Bethany's immediate instinct was to react, but she hesitated, realizing that she had never truly considered how someone might feel in that position. In the role of the flight attendant, she forced herself to listen to the passenger's concerns, nodding and apologizing for the oversight, while offering genuine assistance. As the scene ended, the room grew quiet, and the facilitator asked for feedback. Bethany found herself taken aback by the exercise. She had always prided herself on being efficient, on getting the job done with precision, but the encounter had shown her how her focus on efficiency might come at the expense of empathy. Her heart began to race as she realized that in her pursuit of excellence, she had overlooked the emotional impact of her actions on others. Later, during a break, she wandered outside the training center to clear her head. Her thoughts churned with the weight of the realizations from morning. Asterisk, could I really change? Was I the problem all along? Asterisk, Sebastian had been watching her progress closely, having received updates from the training coordinator about her resistance and eventual engagement. He had expected this initial pushback. It was normal. Change was hard, especially when it challenged long-held beliefs and behaviors. But he was optimistic that, given time, Bethany would come to understand the deeper purpose of the training. Over the next few weeks, Bethany attended the mentoring sessions that had been set up for her. She was paired with an experienced, compassionate flight attendant named Carla, who had been with the airline for over 20 years. Carla was the antithesis of Bethany in many ways, quiet, patient, and deeply committed to making passengers feel seen and heard. Carla shared stories of difficult passengers and, more importantly, how she had learned to deal with each situation not just with professionalism, but with genuine empathy. As Carla spoke about her experiences, Bethany began to realize that it wasn't just about service. It was about connection. It was about recognizing the humanity in every passenger, no matter their background, and offering kindness where it was needed most. In the coming months, Bethany's attitude began to shift. She still had moments of defensiveness, but she also started to approach her work with a new perspective. She took more time to engage with passengers, offering assistance without hesitation, and actively listening to their needs. She even took the time to attend a community outreach program for underrepresented groups, where she learned about the diverse backgrounds of the airline's passengers. Sebastian, watching from behind the scenes, was pleased with the progress. He continued to work on expanding the training program, implementing additional support for staff who needed more guidance. The anonymous feedback system had already proved effective, allowing passengers to voice their experiences without fear of retaliation. The airline's reputation was slowly but surely improving, thanks to the commitment of both its leadership and its employees. Bethany's transformation didn't happen overnight, but it was real. It was no longer about just doing her job. It was about doing it in a way that made a difference in people's lives. One day, after a particularly smooth flight, where she received multiple positive passenger reviews, she found herself reflecting on her journey. Maybe the training wasn't such a waste after all, she thought. Maybe, just maybe, I am part of the change that's coming. In the end, it wasn't just the training that had changed her. It was her willingness to look beyond her own perspective and consider the experiences of others. And that, as Sebastian knew all along, was the key to transforming not only an airline, but an entire culture. Responded. The silence that followed made her feel increasingly uncomfortable, a strange shift in the atmosphere that she couldn't quite place. As she stood at the coffee machine, the murmurs of her colleagues faded into the background, but the weight of their disapproval seemed to linger in the air. Bethany shook it off, convincing herself that they were just gossiping about something trivial. She wasn't going to let it bother her. After all, she had always been a top performer, and if they had issues with her, it was their problem, not hers. But as the days passed, the tension only seemed to grow. The whispers became more frequent, the glances more pointed. Bethany's once confident demeanor began to crack. She was used to being respected, even admired by her colleagues. But now, it felt as though they were all quietly judging her, whispering behind her back about her behavior at the cultural sensitivity training. Despite her growing discomfort, she maintained her usual routine, throwing herself into her work. However, she couldn't escape the mounting pressure of the situation. Every flight felt like an uphill battle, both physically and emotionally. The polite but distant interactions with her colleagues, the subtle coldness in their behavior, it all began to chip away at her confidence. Then came the meeting. Sebastian had requested that Bethany meet with him privately. She entered his office, trying to keep her nerves in check. The door shut behind her with an almost final-sounding click. Sebastian looked up from his desk, his expression unreadable. "Please take a seat, Bethany," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. She complied, sitting down warily. "I've been reviewing your performance," he began, his voice calm but firm. "And I've been thinking about your participation in the sensitivity training." Bethany's stomach tightened. "I don't know what you want me to say," she replied, her tone defensive. "I've done my job for over a decade, and I'm not sure how this training is supposed to help me." Sebastian nodded slowly. "I understand that this might feel unnecessary to you," he said, his gaze softening slightly. "But I want you to know that this isn't about punishing you. This is about giving you an opportunity to grow." Bethany felt a flush of indignation rise in her chest. "Grow," she repeated sharply. "I'm not the one who needs to change, Mr. Dixon." Sebastian sighed, setting his pen down. "Bethany, this isn't just about one person or one incident. It's about creating a better, more inclusive culture here. One where everyone feels respected, staff and passengers alike." Her jaw tightened. "So now I'm the problem, huh?" she said bitterly. "No," Sebastian replied, his voice steady. "But your actions and attitude, as we've seen, have caused some disruption. It's not about assigning blame. It's about understanding that we can all be better. We're a team, and we need to work together to move forward." Bethany bit her lip, fighting the urge to argue. Part of her was furious, but another part of her, deep down, felt the first stirrings of doubt. Could he be right? Was she really causing harm by not engaging with the training? Sebastian continued, "I want to offer you an opportunity to participate in a pilot program that we've designed. It's not just more training, but a chance for you to experience things from a different perspective. There will be workshops, one-on-one sessions, and even community outreach programs where you can interact with a diverse group of people and learn from their experiences. Bethany's first instinct was to refuse outright. She didn't need more lectures. But as she looked at Sebastian's sincere expression, something in her shifted. He wasn't pushing her into a corner. He was offering a chance to change things for the better. "Think about it, Bethany," Sebastian said gently. "You've always been a top performer here. Imagine how much more you could accomplish, not just in your job, but in your personal growth as well, if you open yourself to learning and understanding different viewpoints." Bethany stared at him, feeling a mix of resistance and curiosity. She had always prided herself on her ability to control situations. But now, for the first time, she felt like she was being asked to confront something much bigger than her. This was no longer about her job. It was about her future and the kind of person she wanted to be. Sebastian smiled, as though he could sense her internal struggle. "Take your time to think it over, but know that this opportunity is yours if you choose it." As she left his office, the weight of his words hung in the air. Bethany had always considered herself strong, confident, and unshakable. But now, in the face of his offer, she couldn't help but wonder, could she truly change? Was it possible to become the kind of person who understood the value of empathy and respect? She didn't have an answer yet, but she knew one thing for sure. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, and she wasn't going to face it alone. Bethany's stomach churned as she stared at the email, her eyes scanning the words over and over again, live streamed to every employee in the company. Her mind raced, her heart thudding in her chest. She had hoped that the training would be over soon, a minor inconvenience in her otherwise successful career, but this was different. This wasn't just another session. This was going to be a spectacle, and she was at the center of it. Her breath came faster as the gravity of the situation began to sink in. She felt exposed, vulnerable. All her doubts about the training, about the changes she'd been asked to make, rushed back to the surface. Could she really face her colleagues and the passengers she wronged? Could she publicly acknowledge the mistakes she had made and the impact of her behavior? Bethany closed her eyes for a moment, trying to steady herself. She had spent years building her reputation as a competent, no-nonsense flight attendant. Now, all of that was at risk. She had always prided herself on her ability to maintain control over every situation, but now she was being forced to confront her own shortcomings in front of everyone. What if they don't forgive me? What if I can't change? The thoughts swirled in her mind, making it hard to think clearly. Her instincts screamed at her to run, to avoid the humiliation, to pretend that none of this was happening. But another part of her, a quieter voice deep inside, told her that this was the moment she had to face. She couldn't keep hiding from herself, from the impact of her actions. "I can't keep pretending it's not a problem," she thought, her hands gripping the edge of the counter for support. With a deep breath, Bethany pulled herself together. She knew that this wasn't just about her career anymore. It was about making a choice to grow or to stay stuck in her old ways. As she stepped out of the break room and into the hallway, her mind made up, she realized that she wasn't just walking toward the next training session. She was walking into a new chapter of her life, one that would require every ounce of courage she had left. The live stream was scheduled for the following day, and Bethany knew she had no choice but to confront her past. She couldn't undo what she had done, but maybe, just maybe, she could show her colleagues that she was willing to change. As she entered the training room the next day, the weight of everyone's eyes on her made her heart race. This was it. There was no turning back. She had thought that this moment of vulnerability, of honesty, would be a step toward redemption, but now it seemed like the world was questioning everything. The weight of the accusations hit her like a physical blow. It wasn't just her reputation that was on the line. It was the airlines and now, perhaps, the sincerity of everything she had been working toward. The voices in the room continued to murmur, some sounding frustrated, others concerned. Bethany stood frozen, her eyes staring blankly ahead as the room buzzed with tension. She had done what she thought was right, had exposed her flaws in front of everyone. But now, it seemed, she was just another piece of a public relations chess game, caught in the crossfire of a narrative that painted her efforts as disingenuous. Bethany, a voice called from the side, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was Sebastian. He had entered the room quietly, his presence almost a whisper against the chaos. She turned to face him, her chest tightening as she tried to form words, but nothing came. She felt exposed, vulnerable, and the weight of the scrutiny from the live stream still lingered in the air. "You did well," he said softly, stepping closer, his expression serious yet compassionate. "You said what needed to be said. Don't let them distract you." Bethany swallowed hard, trying to steady her breath. I thought this was going to help. I thought it was the right thing." Sebastian gave her a knowing look, his tone calm and measured. "It is the right thing, even if others don't see it yet. The truth is never easy to face, especially when others are looking for a story to tear down. But this isn't just about today. It's about the long road ahead. You're on the path now, whether the world believes it or not." Bethany nodded, the faintest glimmer of hope sparking in her chest, but it was quickly overshadowed by the flood of doubts. Would people really believe that she had changed? Could this really lead to the kind of transformation she needed, both for herself and the airline? As the day wore on, the weight of the situation did not lessen. The article continued to trend, and Bethany knew that her actions would be dissected by the public, by her colleagues, and by every person in the company. But there was one thing she had to hold on to. She had taken the first step. She had admitted her wrongs. She had looked the world in the eye and said, "I was wrong." And in that small, vulnerable act, she knew there was a seed of something bigger, a chance for growth, not just for herself, but for the entire company. If she could keep pushing forward, despite the setbacks and the public scrutiny, maybe, just maybe, she could be part of the change she wanted to see. But for now, all Bethany could do was take things one step at a time, knowing that this was only the beginning of a much bigger journey. Stood up, her legs unsteady as she made her way to the front of the room. She could feel every gaze on her, the weight of her past actions pressing down on her with each step. Her heart raced, her palms clammy, but she knew this was her moment, her chance to truly face the truth and take responsibility. Standing before the microphone, Bethany cleared her throat, her voice faltering at first. She paused, trying to steady her breath. "I need to apologize to everyone, especially to the people whose stories we've just heard." Her words hung in the air, and she could feel the room waiting, holding its breath. The silence felt unbearable, but she pressed on. "When I first heard these stories, I didn't understand," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "I didn't think the things I did mattered that much. But now, I see how wrong I was. I treated people differently because of who they were. I made assumptions that hurt others. Assumptions that I now realize were fueled by ignorance and prejudice. I'm deeply sorry." Bethany's eyes met the elderly woman's, the one who had shared her story about the bag. She could barely speak as she added, "I remember the day you spoke about. I was the one who ignored you. I made you feel invisible. And I am so sorry." A tear slipped down her cheek, but she wiped it away quickly, determined to finish what she had started. "I've been given a chance to change, and I'm not going to waste it. I've learned that this isn't just about me. It's about all of us and how we treat each other. I'm ready to do better. I'm ready to fight for change, not just in myself, but in this company. We can do better, and I'll be the first to make sure we do." The room was still. No one moved, but there was a shift in the air. Bethany's heart was pounding, but for the first time, she felt a flicker of hope. She had said what needed to be said, and even if the road ahead was uncertain, she knew it was the right one. Sebastian, standing at the back of the room, nodded approvingly. He could see the sincerity in her words, the commitment in her eyes. He knew this moment would be pivotal, not just for Bethany, but for the company. Change wasn't going to come easily, but this was a start. This was the first real step toward a better future for them all. As Bethany returned to her seat, She caught sight of the elderly woman who had spoken earlier. The woman smiled softly, a gesture that sent a wave of relief through her. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was a sign that maybe, just maybe, she was on the right path. Bethany stood frozen, her mind racing as the gravity of the situation settled over her. The man she had humiliated, the passenger she had mistreated, was the very one who had been orchestrating the changes she was now trying to embrace. Sebastian Dixon, the owner of the airline. The realization was overwhelming, and her knees nearly buckled beneath her. I can't believe it, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I treated you that way. I don't know what to say. Sebastian gave her a gentle smile, but there was no trace of anger in his expression. I'm not here to rehash the past, Bethany, he said, his voice calm but firm. What happened was wrong. It shouldn't have happened. But I also believe that sometimes a mistake can serve a greater purpose. That incident, your actions, became the catalyst for the changes we started making. You being here, speaking openly, confronting your mistakes. This is how real change begins. Bethany's heart pounded as she processed his words. You mean to say you planned this? She stammered. You wanted me to be a part of this? Sebastian nodded. Not planned per se, he said with a small chuckle. But I knew that if we were going to change the culture of this airline, we needed people to see it from the inside. We needed people to confront their biases and admit their mistakes. I saw something in you, Bethany. I knew you could change, but you had to realize it yourself. Bethany shook her head in disbelief. She had felt so exposed in that moment, so vulnerable in front of the entire company. But now, hearing Sebastian's words, she understood something deeper. This wasn't just about her. It was about everyone. It was about a company willing to acknowledge its flaws and work to be better. And it was about the willingness to forgive and move forward. I never meant to hurt anyone, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't even know I was doing it. I'm so sorry, Sebastian. I can't take back what I did, but I'll do everything I can to make it right. Sebastian placed a hand on her shoulder, offering a reassuring smile. I believe you, Bethany, and I think you're already on the right path. It's not going to be easy, but you're not alone in this. We're all in this together. Bethany nodded, feeling a small sense of relief amidst the storm of emotions. She was starting to see the possibility of redemption, not just for herself, but for the entire airline. She was beginning to believe that change, real change, was possible. As they stood there in the quiet corner of the room, Bethany took a deep breath. She had a long road ahead of her, but for the first time, she felt ready to walk it. A huge mistake in the past, and I can never undo it, Bethany began, her voice steadying as she continued. But I'm here because I believe in growth. I believe that every person, including myself, has the capacity to change. I know that I hurt people, and I'm deeply sorry for that. But today, I want to help create a space where we can all learn and grow together, where we acknowledge our mistakes and work towards making this company a place where everyone, no matter their background, feels valued and respected. She paused, meeting the eyes of the group. Some faces were skeptical, others were curious, but she didn't flinch. She knew she had to own her past, no matter how uncomfortable it made her feel. I'm not here because I deserve this opportunity, she continued, her voice filled with humility. I'm here because I want to make amends. I want to help develop programs that can ensure we never repeat the mistakes of the past. I want to be part of a team that drives real change. Sebastian, who had been watching from the back of the room, felt a wave of pride. He knew Bethany's words wouldn't erase the past, but they were a powerful first step. Her courage to stand in front of the team, her vulnerability in admitting her wrongs, was an example of the very growth they all needed. A few moments of silence passed before one of the trainers, a woman of color, stood up and spoke. I can't say I'm not still hurt by what happened, but I respect your willingness to stand up and take responsibility. Change doesn't happen overnight, but I believe it starts with moments like this. Others in the room nodded, some with reserved expressions, but none with outright dismissal. Bethany's admission had cracked open the door to understanding, and although the journey ahead would be difficult, she felt a sense of resolve settling within her. She wasn't alone in this anymore. As the meeting continued, Bethany began to feel the weight of the task ahead, but it was no longer a burden she feared. She knew it wouldn't be easy, and the skepticism from some of her colleagues was justified. But as she spoke with them about her vision for the cultural sensitivity workshops and the training materials she hoped to create, she saw a glimmer of hope in their eyes. They were willing to listen. Maybe, just maybe, they could start to believe in the possibility of change, too. Sebastian's faith in her was a spark, but it was now up to Bethany to turn that spark into a flame. And with every conversation, every workshop, and every lesson, she knew she was building a new foundation. Not just for the airline, but for herself as well. She was ready to make things right, one step at a time. As the room fell silent, all eyes turning toward her, she felt a wave of nervousness wash over her, but she stood tall, trying to steady her breath. Sebastian smiled warmly at her before continuing. Bethany, he said, his voice filled with sincerity, has not only contributed to the success of our cultural transformation, but she has become a living example of what real change looks like. She's shown us that it's never too late to grow, to learn, and to be better. She's faced her mistakes head-on and worked tirelessly to ensure that others have the chance to do the same. The room erupted into applause. Bethany's eyes stung with tears, but she quickly blinked them away, feeling a mix of gratitude and pride. She wasn't the same person who had walked into this company months ago. She had worked hard to learn, to evolve, and to help others do the same. But this recognition, this moment, felt like the culmination of her journey. Sebastian continued, his gaze warm and appreciative. I know that this transformation is still ongoing, and there are challenges ahead. But today, we celebrate the progress we've made and the people who've made it possible. Bethany is one of those people. The applause grew louder, and Bethany felt a sense of accomplishment she never thought possible. It wasn't just about the recognition. It was about the journey, about how far she had come, how much she had learned, and how deeply she had connected with the people around her. As the applause died down, Sebastian turned to the audience and addressed them directly. This is just the beginning. We've made great strides, but we must keep pushing forward. We owe it to ourselves, our passengers, and our future. Let's continue to learn, grow, and make this airline a place where everyone can feel welcome, respected, and valued. Bethany sat back down, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and humility. She had come a long way, but there was still more to do, and she was ready for it. This wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning of something even bigger. As the meeting wrapped up, many of her colleagues approached her, offering congratulations and words of encouragement. Even Marcus, who had once been her harshest critic, gave her a nod of approval. You've earned this, Bethany, he said, a rare smile crossing his face. Bethany smiled back, feeling the weight of her journey lifting from her shoulders. She was ready for whatever came next, knowing that she was no longer the person she had once been. She was someone who had learned from her mistakes, who had grown through adversity, and who was now part of something bigger than herself, a movement for real, lasting change. And with that, she was ready to continue her work, one step at a time. Amazing, Bethany, Sebastian said, his voice full of admiration. You've come so far, and what you're doing now, helping others see the importance of empathy and respect, it's making a real difference. Bethany smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. Thank you, Sebastian. I couldn't have gotten here without the support and the opportunities you've given me. It feels like I'm finally doing something meaningful. Sebastian nodded thoughtfully, a hint of pride in his eyes. You've not only transformed yourself, Bethany, but you've helped transform this company. You're leading the way for others, showing them that change is possible and that we all have the power to make a difference. Bethany's heart swelled with gratitude, but there was also a sense of responsibility. She knew that this was just the beginning, and the work was far from over. The journey of self-discovery and cultural transformation was ongoing. She was committed to it, for herself, for the airline, and for every person she could help change. Later that day, as Bethany sat in her office, she reflected on how much she had learned and how far she had come. When she had first joined the airline, she had never imagined that she would be in this position. She had been just a flight attendant, unaware of the deep-rooted biases she had carried. Now, she was part of a movement to create real change, and she felt proud of her role in it. As she glanced at the feedback forms from the session, her heart lifted. Many of the trainees had shared how impactful her story was to them, and a few had even written notes of thanks for encouraging them to examine their own biases. That was the real reward, knowing that her vulnerability and honesty had helped others reflect on their own behavior. Sebastian's words echoed in her mind. Every interaction is an opportunity to make someone feel valued and respected. Bethany had learned that lesson the hard way, but now it was her guiding principle. As she prepared for the next workshop, she felt a renewed sense of purpose and commitment. This was her calling now, not just as an employee, but as someone dedicated to creating a more inclusive world. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but Bethany knew she was ready for them. With each passing day, she would continue to grow, learn, and most importantly, help others do the same. Sebastian's words lingered in the air, and Bethany felt a deep sense of connection to him in that moment. He had given her more than just a job or a second chance. He had shown her a path toward true redemption. They had transformed a painful, unjust situation into something meaningful, not just for themselves, but for the entire company. Bethany's heart swelled with gratitude. She could hardly believe the journey she had been on, from the misguided actions of her past to this new role where she could help others change and grow. She had come so far, and now, standing beside Sebastian, looking out at the group of eager trainees, she understood just how powerful their actions could be. "I couldn't have done it without you," Bethany said softly, her voice filled with emotion. "Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." Sebastian gave her a knowing smile. "You did the hard work, Bethany. You made the choice to change, and now you're leading the way for others. That's what truly matters." As the trainees began to file out of the room, inspired and ready to carry the message of inclusivity forward, Sebastian and Bethany shared a quiet moment of reflection. They had turned a moment of injustice into a ripple effect of change, and as they looked out at the growing positive impact, both felt a profound sense of accomplishment. In the end, it wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about helping people grow, about transforming their mistakes into opportunities for learning and change. Sebastian and Bethany had both learned this lesson well, and together, they had created something far more powerful than either of them could have imagined. Bethany looked at the trainees one last time, her eyes sparkling with hope for the future. She had not only found her calling, but had become part of something greater, a movement that would continue to grow, one conversation, one action at a time. With a quiet nod, Sebastian placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "This is just the beginning," he said, and Bethany couldn't help but agree. They had turned a painful chapter into a beautiful new beginning, for themselves, for the airline, and for everyone they touched. As they stood side by side, watching the trainees leave with renewed purpose, they both knew they had made a difference. And that was the most powerful form of redemption they could ever have hoped for. If you've been moved by the story of Sebastian and Bethany and want to see how real change can make a difference, don't stop here. It's time to reflect on your own biases and take action. Every one of us has the power to contribute to a culture of empathy, respect, and inclusion. Click here to learn more and join the movement. Let's continue to grow together, one step at a time. Your journey toward change starts now.